Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. 2016 marked a long and violent year in the life of the city of Chicago. 3,550 shootings, 762 murders. That's an average of more than 2 killings every single day, and it's getting worse. This year's death toll marked a 57% increase over the year before. So what is going on in Chicago? Well, to many politicians and activists, the answer is obvious. There are too many guns and not enough restrictions on those guns. But wait, Chicago already has some of the strictest gun control laws in the country, and those laws have not gotten any looser. Could it be that the left's central assumption about crime control is wrong? Joining us now is Joshua Horowitz. He's Executive Director of the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Joshua, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So if you look at the numbers, and I have, there doesn't seem to be any direct correlation between gun ownership and acts of violence. So more Americans own guns than they did 20 years ago, a lot more. And there are far more guns per person in America than there were 20 years ago, and the homicide rate has dropped dramatically. If gun control is the answer, how can that be right?
Well, I think we've got to talk about some of the assumptions that you made. First of all, gun ownership across the board is not up. Gun ownership concentrated in less individuals is, as you mentioned, owning more and more guns. But here's what's interesting. I think in the last couple of years, you've seen some of the results of our guns everywhere policies in a number of different states, and we're seeing the murder rate and the gun homicide rate go up 14 to 15, and of course 15 to 16. We don't have the final numbers, but we can imagine that gun violence is in fact now going up. So I think we have to sort of look at that and say, what's going on in the United States? Have we loosened gun laws too much? Where are we with that? And I think, as we've discussed, I really believe gun ownership per se has an effect on the suicide rate. But I think that on the homicide rate, you have a much more complex picture.
Well then, but wait, I've been told since I was a child that the reason there are so many murders in places like Detroit and Chicago is because there are not enough gun laws, or they're going across state lines to buy guns. If that's true, if more guns concentrated results in more killings, then why do the states with the loosest gun laws have the lowest murder rates, which is true? Well, Hampshire, Vermont, Wyoming, Maine, Idaho.
So that's not true. So there are some states that have loose gun laws that have low murder rates, but there are also some states, for instance, Louisiana, Arizona,
South Carolina,
with very lax gun laws and very high homicide rates.
But the highest, but look, I'm not arguing that there's a direct correlation between loose gun laws and low murder rates.
Right.
I'm merely arguing that gun control doesn't make us safer. That's pretty obvious based on the numbers. So why are you still running a gun control program?
Okay, so let me just give you an example. There's a really interesting study out of Missouri recently. Okay, so Missouri gets rid of their gun violence prevention laws, right? So that they have a permit to purchase law and they have some concealed carry restrictions. Those are all gone. And their homicide rate their gun homicide rate goes up 25%. So the evidence is getting closer and closer. We really believe the evidence is showing that, in fact, a group of gun violence prevention laws, in fact, do lower the homicide rate.
Really?
And
like what? Okay, so Chicago, 3,500 shootings last year,
right.
762 murders. What gun laws would have prevented that?
So Illinois has okay gun laws, okay? So they don't have the best, they don't have the worst. But what they do have is 60% of their guns that end up in crime come from other states. And those other states, of course, think about Wisconsin, Mississippi, Indiana leads the way there, right? So those guns are coming in from those states with weak gun laws. And they're going across borders, and they're ending up in crime in Chicago. So what we really need to do is to make sure that the evidence-based laws that we think work, background checks, et cetera, that we have them on a national basis, because Illinois is in a
But hold on, I've just heard this argument, but so New York City has seen a dramatic drop in gun crime, right?
Right, and they have great gun laws.
And it's right south of Vermont, which has the laxest gun laws in America. You could get in a car and drive up there. So why isn't that the same?
Because first of all, New York, first of all, it's the same thing as Illinois, where the crime guns are coming from out of state. But New York is in a much safer neighborhood, right? So that you have to go quite some distance to get a firearm. You just can't go.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Because like everyone I know in New York has a weekend home in Vermont. Look, the point is, this stuff doesn't work, and it doesn't work.
I think the evidence shows that it works, and that's important.
Then why isn't it working in Chicago? Really, is the real reason it's all the fault of Indiana?
No,
really?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think we'd be better off in Chicago with more firearms?
It depends. In the hands of whom?
Right.
I would be better off in Chicago with a firearm,
Right.
and yet it's almost impossible for me to get one in Chicago because the laws are so. There are no gun stores in Chicago.
No, the laws
I have to what if I have to register it? As if I'm a criminal?
No, actually not. Illinois does not have registration. Illinois has licenses.
The city of Chicago does. Yes, it does. You have to buy a license to have a gun.
Illinois has a license. And what you do is you get a license. Actually, it goes for 10 years.
So I have to ask the permission of the authorities. Look, the only point is, for example, I go onto your website and you say one of the big problems is assault rifles. So of the 762 murders in Chicago, how many were committed with assault rifles?
Well, I don't know that actually that's from my website, but let me tell you.
Well, yeah, it is. Actually, I have it right here.
So let me explain to you about assault weapons. Assault weapons make killing more lethal, okay? So what we have in that situation is assault weapons have more deaths per shooting. They don't necessarily cause more shootings, but when you use an assault weapon in a crime, you end up with more people dead and more rounds
so
fired.
in Chicago, there are 762 murders last year. How many were committed with so-called assault weapons?
Right, but you know what? That's a small issue.
Well, what's the answer?
Well, I don't know.
But you run a gun control group. I mean, and you're pushing for right here, semi-automatic, military-style firearms designed for one person to kill people. Right. So we have the city with one of the highest murder rates in the country. Right. And how many were committed with assault weapons?
But I think the bigger question is how many guns were trafficked without background checks? That's what I spend my day working on. I want to figure out how do we prevent guns from being trafficked. And let me give you another example. We have a terribly weak federally anti-trafficking law right now. And one of the biggest issues, and I'm sure you agree with me, and this is a bipartisan issue, if you are trafficking firearms, there should be a real penalty for it, and there should be federal deterrence. We don't have that in this country, and that's why a number of Republicans and...
You know, you haven't sold me. You haven't explained why a state like Vermont or Maine or Idaho or Wyoming or Texas, where I can buy ammunition at a gas station, have such low murder rates.
I'll tell you why. Because their crime rate's low. So here's
but why are the crime? I mean, so in other words, there's no direct correlation. This is the only point I'm making. I realize this is a complex question.
It is very complex.
But gun control is held up by the left as something we could do. We just don't have the will because the evil NRA is stopping us. And the truth is, there are more guns than people in America. If we passed every single law you wanted, do you really think that the murder rate in Chicago would drop?
Yes, I absolutely do.
You really do?
I do, because the states that are supplying guns to Chicago would be forced to do background checks. We'd had a trafficking law. It would make it much
criminals, many of these guns come from theft, as you know, or they're sold between people who don't obey the law. So these people are, by definition, beyond the reach of the law. A little naive to believe that they're going to obey these laws.
Oh, yeah. I'm not. It's not that. It's on the law-abiding gunner, right? Here's the thing. Right now, you can transfer a firearm completely above board. You know, you can go on, sell it on an internet site or whatever, to someone without doing a background check. That person may be a criminal, may not be. But here's the thing. We want to make sure that the law-abiding gun owner is not transferring into the criminal market. The law-abiding gun owner is it will do the right thing, but it's really the issue of how do we not transfer guns.
Well, what if the law-abiding gun owner wants to own what you called a military-style assault weapon?
Yeah.
Okay. Why can't he do that? And second, what is a military-style assault weapon?
So let me give you the definition first. So it's a centerfire rifle,
right?
Okay, with a detachable magazine. Okay, so above a .22 caliber, centerfire detachable,
right?
With a grip below the stock and something on the front to hold it. So those are the definitions of assault weapon.
Well, that's not so different from my .30-06. A deer rifle, so why?
It is different. Do you have a thumbhole stock on that and a detachable magazine and a...
Yeah, it's got a detachable magazine.
But does it have all the other items? Now, let me tell you why.
Who cares what the stock is like? Sure, I mean, this suggests you don't know much about guns to me.
I think it really matters, and I think maybe you haven't shot... Have you shot an AR-15?
Yeah, I own one.
Okay, great. So what's important about an AR-15? Important about an AR-15 is you can keep your barrel, and you probably can do this, your muzzle on the target round after round after round. You don't have to reload. It's meant to kill people. So here's what I think we should do. If you own one, I think we treat them the same way we treat machine guns. And people, the NRA says all the time, machine guns don't cause any crime.
Okay.
I believe, and this is a bill introduced by Representative Cicilline from Rhode Island, that we should treat them just like any other Class 3 weapon and have the same procedure.
But it's a distinction without a difference. Let me just ask you one final question.
Yeah.
What round do you think is deadlier? The .223 that fires from the military-style assault weapon, or the .30-06, or the .30-30 conventional?
Well, I know which one's more. I mean, I know which has more power. So the .30-30 obviously has more power, but .223 goes at a higher velocity. Okay. No, it's serious, and it's meant to be anti-personnel, and you can put lots of them in the cartridge at the same time. 223 is an anti-personnel round. I'm not going to argue with you. Rifle rounds are powerful, too. Configure them the way an assault weapon, and you create something that's much more lethal.
The data don't show that at all. But it's nice to have you on. Thank you for your game defense.
I hope I get back someday.
Nice to see you.
All right.